Hello and welcome to Project Archangelos episode number 13. It is Easter Sunday. It is the evening. Happy Easter. And today I just wanted to talk about a dream that I had last night, basically. I'll keep this episode short. And it fits the theme of this podcast because this podcast is named around a vision or a series of visions that I experienced in 2020 regarding an archangel, hence Archangelos, with the project element relating more to this new profession that I've been developing in computer science. So the project element adding to the secrecy, relating to like secret esoteric knowledge, but I weave it in with mathematics, philosophy, computer science, maybe little bits of AI, little bits of cybersecurity. So Project Archangelos, so that's why I'll talk about dreams. I'll talk about dreams as much as I want, because that's like the whole starting point. That's like the germinating seed. That's the germ. That's the seed for this whole podcast, is based around visions that I've experienced. So when I experience a kind of vision, I feel it relevant to discuss it in the podcast. So last night I had a dream basically relating to war. I had a dream around war, but in a really unique kind of way, as dreams tend to be. Even though there are archetypal forms to dreams, recurring patterns and themes, it wasn't war as we understand war based in Hollywood movies. It was more medieval in theme, Middle Ages, knights and castles. But I was in a kind of, whether it was a castle or whether it was like a fortified wall with levels, kind of like a city or like a multi-level building in the walls. But just think those old style, what is it, cobblestone, Middle Ages, castle, fortified wall style aesthetic. And basically, it was like narrow. It was a vertical. I'm doing hand gestures for those of you listening to the audio. It was vertical. It was like a vertical situation. It wasn't like a horizontal war. It wasn't like a battlefield. It was like a tower of sorts. There was water involved, but I'll get to that if I can even get to it, because you know the nature of dreams. They can be a bit all over the place, and you just remember like, oh yeah, and this thing was kind of random. I remember a little bit of that. But the whole theme was war. But it's interesting. So it was set in the Middle Ages, but there was also this subplot going on where I was learning off this older guy. He was a computer programmer, and he was sort of telling me about his experiences in the profession of programming and perhaps hacking, cybersecurity, programming, somewhere in between there. He was just showing me some tricks and just telling me about his experiences, almost like an apprenticeship situation. So you have this juxtaposition of Middle Ages warfare with swords mixed with modern day 21st century technology in the form of computers, digital technology, which really ties in with this theme of techno-feudalism, which is coined, I believe, by, I think his name is Yanis Varoufakis. A friend of mine just reminded me of that person and that book, but it's also been referred to in recent times as neo-feudalism. But perhaps it makes more sense, or maybe it's more understandable thinking in terms of techno-feudalism. So technology, feudalism, feudalistic systems where we are like serfs SERFS. We're like peasant serfs. We don't even own the land. We are renting the land and we have to work a certain amount to be able to live on the land. But it's technological feudalism, where perhaps we can think in terms of data. We don't own anything. We rent everything. We subscribe to everything. We don't even own CDs anymore, for example. Everything is a subscription that we're paying for, and we don't even own the thing. We are subscribing and paying for access to the thing. So anyway, techno-feudalism. So maybe that weaved into my subconscious somehow, just those ideas. Very relevant though, because if we are to experience warfare on a mass scale in the 21st century, akin to World War III, well, it is feeling very both medieval and cutting edge 21st century futuristic technological. The medieval aspect is to do with you just can't talk about anything. Well, it's easing up a little bit now, but it's also not in many regards. But just the censorship regimes. And there are arguments to be made that censorship is good in some circumstances. But it's just the extremes it's been taken to, and just reminiscent of book burnings and just heresy, like church-like heresy. So it's this juxtaposition of medieval thinking. We're like peasant humans in a way, particularly in our thought. And it's funny because we're so enlightened scientifically, but at the same time, the majority of people rely on scientific experts for their knowledge. So we like to act superior and arrogant with things like religion and spirituality. We like to think, oh, we've myth busted that, we've debunked all of that stuff. But then if you ask someone, it's just like a series of questions about the nature of God, the nature of reality, the nature of the universe, the nature of ideas, the nature of language. Where do thoughts come from? Why consciousness? Why don't we just all not be conscious entities? We didn't need to experience. We didn't need to experience. Experience was not necessary in the grand scheme of the universe, one would assume. So why is it that we have experiences? Why is it that we have a sense of a self, an identity, a sense of seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, thinking, awareness? Why would the universe create that? It feels like there's no need. We could have just been automaton. We could have just been robots. We didn't need to have a sense of self. So what's going on with that? So my point is, it's very easy to just ask a so-called like scientist or atheist these questions, and you can observe how uncomfortable they will get, and dismissive, and often arrogant, and often a lot of hubris, where they just assume that they're correct. Not everybody, okay, not everybody. I'm just talking in general. There are more open-minded people out there. But the reason I bring that up, it's to do with, it's like humanity right now. We're in the 21st century, but we're also in the dark ages in a very strange way regarding information, regarding speech, freedom of speech, if you like, which apparently Australia doesn't even have freedom of speech in the way that the USA does, United States of America. So we're in the dark ages, but we're also in the most technologically advanced civilization to exist. And then you could say, well, they've been like ancient civilizations with technologies that are beyond anything that we could perceive right now. And it's like, look, okay, just, you get what I'm saying though, this juxtaposition of this. space age technology in the form of digital electronics, because we're in the digital age. We're in the digital age and we're in the information age. So anyway, the war dream. I digress, baby. I digress. So, well, that's why I was just going to keep this episode short, because that's really all it was. There was a war occurring, and it sort of felt like I was ascending the levels of this castle or fortress or fortified wall with levels that I was in. It's kind of ascending, fighting off people with my sword, while also getting apprenticeship instruction from this programmer dude. So that juxtaposition of 21st century technology, but medieval warfare, knights and castles. I think water was rising as well. There was a sense of like water was kind of barricading certain entrances and exits. Very akin to if you've ever played the game Fortnite, how the storm is closing in. Kind of like that, but with water. And I'm ascending. And basically I reached a point, and it was something very similar to the dream I experienced the previous night, which was more psychic, to do with extraterrestrials, where I reached a point in the dream where it felt like, oh, we're losing. We're actually losing this war. And our soldiers are running out, and I can only climb so much of this tower. There's only so many levels. And I reached a point where I thought, okay, maybe I'll just hide and just wait till all this passes over. I'll just find like a little cupboard or nook and I'll just hide. But there was a part of me that went, no, you can't do that, because otherwise you'll be a coward. You'll be known as a coward, and not even for the sake of your reputation, but just your reputation with yourself. That's a cowardly move. You have to go out there and just face your fate, even if it's you against an army of 200 or 2,000 soldiers. You have to go out there and face your fate. Very similar to what I experienced the previous night with these psychic entities in my dream. So 2 dreams, one after the other, kind of significant as well. Significant symbolic dreams, not just random daily occurrences. There was a moment, and it was more when I woke up the previous night with the psychic alien dream. I woke up at like 3 a.m. and I just had this overwhelming sense. I think it's quoted in the Bible, be not afraid. Because a part of me, when I woke up, I still felt like this psychic presence, almost like Mewtwo. Mewtwo, if you've ever watched Pokemon, Mewtwo, the first Pokemon movie, Pokemon 2000. No, was it the one before that? Anyway, yeah, I think it was Pokemon 2000. The one with Mewtwo, it was the first movie. And he almost, well, he's a psychic type Pokemon, so he did have psychic abilities. And it just felt like this Mewtwo presence was there with me, almost like breathing with me. And I just kept thinking to myself, be not afraid, be not afraid. And that actually allowed me to not be afraid. Be not afraid, not be afraid. I just kept reciting that to myself, and it actually allowed me not to freak out, because it could have been freaky, feeling like there's an alien presence in the room communicating with you telepathically. But I just kept thinking of that quote, be not afraid, be not afraid. And then I gradually just went back to sleep. I got up, went to the bathroom, laid back down. That presence was still there, and just gradually went back to sleep. And it was the same kind of theme in this dream, where I decided, no, you can't just hide. That's like a coward's ending to this tale. You just have to go out there and you just have to fight. You're probably going to die. The odds are stacked against you mathematically. But you have to just stand your ground. Don't die a coward's death. Die a hero's death. And then I woke up. But I think that's a pretty powerful theme. So anyway, I just really wanted to share that, even just to document it. Maybe we can make sense of it. We can plot it on a graph later, these dreams I'm experiencing and these visions. But that was the gist of it. It was a war. There was water involved. It was medieval times, but it was also 21st century hyper-technological times where I was training to be a programmer by an apprentice dude, programmer dude. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. Let me know if that was interesting, if that was relevant, if you've experienced anything similar, any similar visions, dreams, fantasies, things that are just coming to you. It feels very relevant because, as you know, we are on the brink of war, or some may argue we are already in a war, and it's a psychological war and all of the things. So there may be like a, what do you call it, implicit. We are in an implicit war, but it's not so explicit yet, or who knows, maybe it is explicit. But let me know if that resonated. And basically, I wish you all the best and I send you peace and love.